So I saw this. I stumbled upon this the other day, and it was talking about Christian McCaffrey and his really great season last year, and Madden cover stuff, and it was like to show you like Christian McCaffrey, like the white boy running back, like what he's able to do still in today's NFL versus like the NFL 20 years ago. In 2003, there were 14 running backs to rush for over 1,200 yards. 14.
What year did you say? 2013?
2003. So 20 years ago.
Sorry.
2003, okay. There was 14 running backs to rush for over 1,200 yards. Last year, it was
half
just
the league,
just Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey ended with 1459. Derrick Henry missed the mark. Kyron Williams was close. James Cook. There's a bunch of guys that made it over 1,000, but that 1,200 mark, only one, and that was Christian McCaffrey.
That's crazy. I wouldn't have even guessed that. Just thinking back to last year alone, like
he was the only one to hit over 1,200,
and he hit over it by 250 yards. He had over 2 games worth of a good running back's production. That's crazy.
And there's an extra game in this modern NFL than there was in 2003's modern NFL. Can you try to name? I have the list in front of me now.
Okay,
some of the dudes who ran for over 1,200 yards in 2003.
Okay. So we got 14 names in 2003.
You're gonna know. I think you're gonna know every one of these names except for maybe 2 when I read them off.
Okay, I don't know why this first came to mind, but Deshaun Foster.
I don't know why that came to mind either, but I don't see Deshaun Foster on this list.
Okay. I don't know why that
you missed a Hall of Famer there, but who would you say? Clinton Portis?
Clinton Portis.
Yeah, he's on there.
Okay. Let's see. I should just try and go by teams because that'll probably be easier for me. Who would have been the running back? Larry Johnson or Priest Holmes?
Priest Holmes on the list. Yep. Okay. For the Chiefs.
All right. So I'm sticking in AFC West right now, and I'm trying to think who else would the Raiders running back then would have been. Would that have been Darren McFadden then? No, I still think that's early for McFadden.
Too early for McFadden.
Lamont Jordan?
No Lamont Jordan. Can I give you? Let me start giving you some teams, and then it'll really go easier. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, Jamal Lewis. Okay.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Green Bay
that might have been his 2,000-yard season.
Maybe. Green Bay Packers. This guy haunted me.
Amon Green.
Amon Green.
Okay.
San Diego Superchargers. This is the Hall of Famer.
LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yeah. New Orleans Saints.
Ricky Williams.
No, look what I'm holding up. 2.
What? How am I? That would have been too early. Way too early for Reggie Bush.
2.
What's the 2?
Deuce McAllister.
Deuce McAllister. All
right. I don't know. I honestly don't know these guys. Travis Henry. I can't think of Travis Henry.
Was he? Who did he play for then? Was he?
It doesn't show. I can't tell from the jersey.
Travis Henry played for the Broncos.
It might have been. And then Steven Davis, which I think is the Carolina Panthers.
Carolina Panthers. Yeah. No,
okay. Those are the ones that I was like, I don't really know these guys. Seattle.
Travis Henry did play for the Broncos. Seattle's running back then?
Yeah.
Oh, that is Sean Alexander.
Yeah, Madden cover. The running back then, it would have been for the Miami Dolphins.
Then for the Miami Dolphins.
New Orleans Saints drafted him, but by this time he was on the Dolphins. Ditka traded all his picks to get him.
Oh, that was Ricky Williams. Okay.
Yeah.
That was
New York Jets.
Curtis Martin.
Really great running back. Jacksonville Jaguars.
Fred Taylor.
There you go. Indianapolis Colts.
Edgerrin James.
Yeah, and then the New York Football Giants.
Tiki Barber.
Yeah, you did. See, once
Okay.
I started doing the names of the teams, then that was easy.
Then that makes it.
I mean, that would have been easy for me too. That's like our prime. That was prime. 13 years old. Like I eat, breathe, and
Yeah.
sleep football, and that's it.
No, that was like the first era of football that I really like got into. So that was,
early 2000s.
Definitely reminiscent of some good memories there. That's cool. Yeah, I like the trivia stuff. We'll try and incorporate that more every now and then that we can. I'll have to come up with some stumpers for you too. But I'm looking forward to this list here today that you brought to our attention. FanDuel's best player on each NFL team, which you would think is a gimme. But as you kind of go through the list, there are some question marks and even some disagreements that I think we have with this list.
It's hard with the bad teams. With the good teams, it's kind of easy. Chiefs, Mahomes, like, okay. But some of these bad teams are like, yeah, I guess that's their best player. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, some you're like, geez, we had no offense to the player, but we had to really scrape the bottom of the barrel to get the best best players on each team. So yeah, looking forward to it. Let's dive in. The best players on each NFL team. We got 32 names to go. Here we are. All right. Before we jump into this list, the only breaking news that's really transpired since we were last on the airwaves last Monday was some very unfortunate news. I hate to break open shows with this sometimes, but the former cornerback for the Minnesota Vikings, their 4th round selection in this year's draft, Kyrie Jackson, passed away in a car accident, and it was a multi-vehicle accident. 2 of his former high school teammates who were also college players died in the accident too. Apparently he was a passenger and they got hit by somebody going at a high rate of speed. And looks like, that driver may have been impaired. So that's kind of the latest we have on that investigation, but obviously way too young. And same with his, the other passengers in that vehicle as well. So obviously hearts go out to his family. Really brutal thing to kind of have to, spring onto, the NFL stages. Everyone's getting excited for the season. And all of a sudden you just get some brutal news that brings you down to reality of the unfortunate nature of sometimes fluke accidents happen. And in this case, potentially preventable one too, with that other driver. But just really sucks, man. The guy at the height of his, accomplishments so far, getting drafted the NFL. And I'm sure, his family, they just got done having a major celebration going into camp. And here you are having to deal with this. It's tough.
It's really brutal. And I will say, obviously for the Minnesota Vikings, they're going to begin camp with kind of those heavy hearts, and you'll see how it impacts guys early on. And I think it'll be a big motivating kind of rally cry for them all year long of like, hey, this season means a little bit extra more, you know what I mean? In the emotional toll that it's going on. But also I know Caleb Williams posted on his social media, a lot of other rookies, like guys in that rookie draft class, you get to know each other, guys who he would have played against in his teammates. There's a lot of people around the NFL this morning and this week that are mourning his passing. And it's not just Minnesota, but obviously really, really tough news. And one of those things that's just a reminder that life is one of those fragile things. And it can be taken away from you extremely, extremely quickly. So hug your loved ones. And it's an absolute devastating and extremely, extremely unfortunate situation for him and his family and the team that a guy they drafted, they had a lot of, faith in, taking him the 4th round is gone way too soon.
Yeah, big accomplishment there. 4th round out of Oregon. I think he also played at Alabama during his college career as well. So yeah, again, brutal news to start off with, and hearts go out to his family and the whole Minnesota Vikings team, who's going to have to, find a way to turn this into something, some positive fuel for them going into training camp and throughout the season to play for him and his memory. All right, so transitioning to that list that you brought forward last week, you kind of texted it to me and said this could be a good option to go through. We've discussed some other lists, head coaching tiers, quarterback tiers, things of that sort. Now FanDuel brings us best players on each NFL team. So your initial assessment of this as we kind of dive in.
I just love this. I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay. Your first glance, you say to yourself, man, they got like, this isn't that clickbaity. There's a lot of things right. Like the first thing you check is like, is the Chiefs Patrick Mahomes? Okay, it is. It's not too clickbaity. And then you start to dig into it, and I really started saying to myself, well, wait a minute. Doesn't that team, I would maybe have chosen that person over that person. I think there's, to me, 3 teams that I have strong disagreements with. And I think there's about 5 or 6 teams I look in and I say, you could convince me really strongly either way for some other options. And I don't think it's necessarily an insult to the guys that were chosen, but just more, man, that team's got a lot of good players. And so I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it as well as we go through player by player to see if we have some of the same questions as to whether that's who we would have chosen to put on if we were in charge of FanDuel's social account putting this list together.
Yeah, all right. So let's pull up the list here, and you'll see it on your screen there. We've got the list of all 32 teams and their respective players. Again, this is FanDuel's list of the best players on each NFL team. We'll start with the top left and work our way down the columns here. So Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals, they have not too much disagreement with me, to be honest with you.
No, I made sure I went through the Cardinals roster just to make sure they didn't have like an offensive lineman who was like a second team all-pro last year or something.
Yeah.
And, they actually have a surprising amount of talent in Arizona, but Kyler is certainly what I would argue is their centerpiece, their best player for sure.
Yeah, so that's a fairly easy one, and obviously just the talent alone, he's by far the most talented player on the team, and so that kind of made it a little bit easier to kind of start and end with Kyler Murray. Now we get to the the Atlanta Falcons, and they have Chris Lindstrom. So my initial thoughts were, okay, really good guard, on an offensive line that's needed some work over the last few years. He's kind of been the best piece on that offensive line. You think about the defense and you're like, I don't see too many great players, but AJ Terrell's pretty good. You've got Grady Jarrett, who's pretty talented. It can be kind of funny, but one of the best kickers in the league, Younghoe Koo, he might be in contention there. And then you do bring in Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, and Drake London on that offense. To me, I know Chris Lindstrom's really good. I still think Bijan Robinson's probably the best player on this team, though.
I think Bijan would be the one I'd be like, okay, if they swapped him. But Chris Lindstrom was second team All-Pro last year.
Yeah,
in a very good season. And I do think it's one of those opportunities, the few teams that had an opportunity to be like, you know what, we can put an offensive lineman in this spot. So they didn't end up on my kind of poop list. I was okay with Lindstrom. But yeah, Bijan, if you want to swap it for Bijan, I'm not going to fight you on that too hard. He had a very nice rookie year, and I think he's only going to take another step forward in year 2, especially with a legitimate threat in the passing game and a quarterback who you have to respect his ability to pick up, third downs with his arm as opposed to just relying on Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, and they're going to need Chris Lindstrom's help this year to revitalize that run game a little bit and keep that wheel churning with Bijan and also protect, as you said there, Mr. Kirk Cousins. All right, so not too much disagreement there. I think we're both fine with Chris Lindstrom being there. I would probably go Bijan just because of the talent, but second team All-Pro, hard to argue with that. The Baltimore Ravens, they have a lot of talent on their team, but Lamar Jackson, the reigning 2-time MVP here, gets the nod as the best player on the team. I think that's accurate. What say you?
Agreed. Yeah, there's no question there. Or with the next one for me, I think those are two no-brainers that I'm glad they didn't go too clickbaity on.
Real quick, with Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, who would be in contention for this? Would it be number 2 Mark Andrews for you, or would it be somebody on that defense? Because they've had Roquan Smith, one of the best linebackers, off the ball linebackers in the league. Kyle Hamilton had an amazing rookie season. I mean, they got some really talented players.
What's the defensive tackle? Matabike?
Oh, Matabuike, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
as
Although
well.
he kind of came to form last year, with
Yeah,
the
had a very nice
one of those
year.
deals.
No,
Yeah,
this is definitely one of those where it's funny because a guy like a Mark Andrews, a guy like a Roquan Smith would be an easy no-brainer for a lot of teams if you move
yeah,
them around. But
definitely.
they get buried by the two-time MVP. So no, I have
You'll kind
no.
of you'll notice a pattern with a lot of these teams that have multiple options. They tend to be pretty good teams.
Yeah, it's true.
Any
True.
that we have multiple examples for, that would be it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Lamar Jackson, easy one. Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills, another
Easy.
easy one. Probably the second best quarterback in the NFL and has been for quite some time
And
this year.
Buffalo's roster now is in a little bit of a transition, right?
It
Like
is.
2 years
Yeah.
ago, they added Von Miller. You could be like, oh man, he was still great. Well, he's gone. They had Stephon Diggs. Well, he's gone. And there's just enough turnover to where it's very, very obvious that Josh is the best player on that team. But I don't think that means that Buffalo's going to be a worse team. We talked about it. We'll get more into the previews come August, but I'm still feeling very confident in Buffalo. I actually think addition by subtraction is a real thing, and I think it could end up actually helping Buffalo this year.
Yep, I could absolutely see that. No question. The Carolina Panthers are next up on the board. Derek Brown comes in for them, the defensive tackle. Former first-round pick out of Alabama. Really, really good player. He's improved each year, and he is a huge dude. Like, you don't think of the Carolina Panthers defense lately, but he's one of the really good ones. I honestly didn't have too much issue with this pick. The offense, as we know, is pretty devoid of talent.
Yeah.
Defensively, they could have had probably a couple different options here. I mean, I'm a big fan of Jeremy Chin, although he's kind of petered off a little bit. So Derek Brown's the most consistent all-around great player on that team right now.
Yeah, I mean, only 2 sacks last year. And so you're talking about a player who, his impact is felt more in the run game than the pass game on a defense that is young and we think is on the uptick, right?
Sure.
But my thought was maybe, so I was unsold on it just because the name doesn't like ring any sort of like, oh yeah, Derek Brown, duh. But then when you start digging, you look at like Adam Thielen did have 1,000 yards last year, but with his age, everything, he's not the best player on that team. Deontay Johnson to me is interesting, the new wide receiver. Like he's a guy
he could be in that conversation.
I think you could be in that conversation. Like he'd be the only real name that I could think you could kind of swap there and be like, yeah, because even though he's not done anything in a Panthers uniform yet, huge upside, high talent guy, 1,000-yard receiver guy in at the prime of his career. So that's the only other name I could think of, but I'm okay with Derek Brown if they want to stick with Derek Brown.
Yeah, I mean, J.C. Horn's a really, really talented cornerback, but he's been
healthy
since he came into the league, and that's been really tough for him. So he maybe can get himself into that conversation as well.
Yeah.
For your Chicago Bears, we've got Mr. Jalen Johnson, who got paid this past offseason, and rightfully so. Really was an anchor for that defense that struggled at times and then was really able to come into its own. I don't know. I mean, Montez Sweat certainly could be in that conversation for being the catalyst that turned things around for this team.
Yeah.
DJ Moore, really, really talented player. Is Caleb Williams in the conversation here for the Bears best player? I don't know, but they've got some dudes. They've got some options.
If you would have asked me to do this for all the teams, and when I got to the Bears, I would put DJ Moore.
Yeah.
So that was one that I did have. It was in my questionable list. Would the DJ Moore, and that's purely because right now Jalen Johnson is great, and he was second team All Pro, and a great corner is extremely, extremely valuable. But DJ Moore is a game changer and an incredibly explosive athlete. He is to me a bona fide top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, and those are just more important. So maybe that's where I'm getting confused here, because best player versus most important, I think it's a toss-up between who's actually a better player, DJ Moore and Jalen Johnson. I think they're very equal. And then when you throw in the fact that I just see DJ Moore as such a game breaker and a game changer, I have him slightly ahead of Jalen Johnson, who would then also be slightly ahead of Montez Sweat. Sweat's a very, very good player. more of like a solid B plus A minus guy, where Jalen Johnson is an A guy, and it feels like DJ Moore is an A guy as well. You can just kind of pick your preference.
For an interesting thought experiment, if the Bears never traded away Roquan Smith, would he be the name on this?
Yeah, that is interesting. The problem with that would be Roquan talent-wise is there, but again, they moved on Roquan because of the fit, right? Like what he thrives in versus what the head coach wants to do, which again, I think is the dumbest thing in the world. I've said it as a fan of the Bears for years, and other teams will have their own examples. The Bears got rid of a Hall of Fame tight end in Greg Olsen just because he didn't fit Mike Martz's system. It's the dumbest crap I've ever heard. If you have a great player, you build your systems and fit that guy into your system. Stop trading dudes for fit. I get it.
He was the best receiver on that team, like by far.
And so it's just dumb. Like that stuff is dumb. So yeah, I mean, I think my gut says probably, because I think Roquan would have just continued to be great wherever he was. And Roquan, DJ, Jalen Johnson, they all feel like A guys, absolute A guys. So then it's a little bit of a, kind of a pick your preference thing there.
We get to the Cincinnati Bengals. They have Joe Burrow, who may be one injury away from being overtaken on this list by Jamar Chase, because to be honest, Jamar Chase is probably going to be a top 5 to whatever wide receiver in the league for the next decade. Joe Burrow, really, really talented, really good. Probably our number 3, 4 quarterback in the league. I think we said number 3 recently. So it makes sense that he's on here. But yeah, if he gets injured again, Mark, I don't think I could put him on this list just because it's like, productivity is going to wane at that point. You're going to have so many injuries to contend with in your body. You're just not going to be the same player. While Jamar Chase continues to be a spectacular player, day in, day out. But
this is another.
Those are the only 2 options for the Bengals, in my view.
Yeah, it's another great, hilarious thought experiment too. For it's like if Jamar Chase was on half of these teams, he'd be the guy that they listed.
Yeah,
but I think Joe Burrow still earns that right for me right now that he's the best player on the Bengals. Joe Burrow, when healthy, is absolute elite, stratosphere elite, and Jamar Chase also had some injuries for the first time in his career last year.
Yep.
So I think that allows me to feel comfortable sticking with Joe at this spot.
All right. Easy enough. The Cleveland Browns are next up. They've got a lot of really talented players on this team. Myles Garrett comes in as the best player. I'm going to have to agree with that. The only other, players that I would say could be rivaling this spot would be Nick Chubb and maybe potentially Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper's a great player. And Nick Chubb, obviously a very good player, and we hope that Nick Chubb is healthy this year after the bad knee injury. But Myles Garrett, to me, that would have been a no-brainer filling it out. Myles Garrett's the best player in the Cleveland Browns.
And then we get to the Dallas Cowboys, also a star-studded group. Micah Parsons comes in as their best player. I don't have too much of an issue with this. Personally, though, I would probably go CeeDee Lamb in this spot. But I understand the move.
If I were doing this filling it out, I would have said Micah Parsons just ahead of CeeDee Lamb. So I think Micah, the difference is I think that Micah has the Dallas Cowboys defense has really taken a huge leap forward since Micah Parsons arrived. You got him and Diggs, and it just changed that defense and what Dan Quinn was able to do with it. Micah Parsons is one of those absolute freaks in the Myles Garrett world, to where they just don't make them like that. And CeeDee Lamb, I think, is extremely talented. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. But I think Micah Parsons is probably the second best edge rusher in the NFL right now. So I think that to me is more important. And so I'd go Micah, slight lean over CeeDee Lamb.
Also got to shout out Zach Martin, who's probably still in contention for this.
A
future
absolutely.
Hall of Famer, but he's on definitely the back end of his career.
I'd keep him ahead of Dak. I would have him ahead of Dak for sure.
Yes. The Denver Broncos come in, and the young cornerback Patrick Surtain already atop this list. So the Broncos have been devoid of talent for a little bit of time now, and continue to lose some players. So it's pretty easy to put Patrick Surtain up here, I guess, Justin Simmons, who actually is he a free agent still right now? I don't even
No,
know, because he would be in contention, I would say.
I think he ended up somewhere else. But Patrick Surtain was, to me, again, it was another one of those rosters I
He still is
checked.
a free agent. That's crazy.
Well, I was waiting for a camp injury or something somewhere.
Yeah, because he's still like a super talented player. So
my gut was like, okay, this feels right, but let's check the roster. You know what I mean? And like, make sure I'm not missing a name. But yeah, Denver is young, and they have some then age on the offensive line, and Patrick Surtain to me is clearly their blue chip piece overall on the roster for sure.
yeah, I mean, he's top 5 at his position, probably top 3. Is there anybody else on the Broncos that's top 3 to 5 at their position? I don't think you could say
No,
that's the case.
no.
So yeah, easy selection for the Broncos. The Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown takes the lead here. Obviously, the Lions have a really good team. I guess they're one of those that is filled with really, really, really good players and not too many superstars. I disagree with this one, though. I have another player I would put here. Curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, this is the first one of my. The second one of my questionables. So it's not my top 3 that I completely disagree with, but I question Amon-Ra St. Brown over Penei Sewell. I think Penei Sewell is a generational. When he retires, we will talk about him in the likes of a Trent Williams, Anthony Munoz, Orlando Pace, multiple first-team All-Pros, multiple Pro Bowls, 10 years. And he might actually be one of the few people, unlike a Joe Thomas, to last his whole career with a bad franchise, but during the times of winning. Like, I think he's contributing to the winning. And I think that's will add to the lore that will be Penei Sewell. I think Penei Sewell right now is the best player on the Detroit line. So I didn't put it in my top 3 of strongly disagree, but I do question it and I disagree with it.
Yeah, disagree here, and I would put Penei Sewell there as well.
Sam Laporta also closing quickly. Laporta
he is.
Was second team All Pros, a rookie as a tight end. If he has another year like he did last year, all the other tight ends got to keep an eye out for that kid now, because he just skyrocketed to near the top. You know what I mean? When you start to look at pick your top 5 tight ends in the NFL right now, you cannot not include Sam Laporta even just after 1 year, which is just wild with how deep that position has become.
And then right on the heels, Aiden Hutchinson. So I would, they've got Aiden some Hutchinson dudes that can contend for this spot. Amon-Ra, really, really good player, but
it's a good team.
It is. The Penei Sewell is probably the best tackle in the league right now, and so that has to put him there. The Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love gets here on this one. I also disagree with this.
So again, this is another one of my questionables. I'm not like dying on the hill for this to change, but I mean, when you look at the roster overall, I think there's names that I would have thought of first, including Jair Alexander. I know he had a rough year last year with injuries, but he's been consistently one of the great defensive backs over the last 3 years. And then Josh Jacobs. You add Josh Jacobs to that weapon group. He is an elite running back that I know what I'm getting over the last 3 years. And Jordan Love had a really great 8-game stretch down the season, but does that make him the best player on the Packers? That's fine, I guess, if you want to say it, but I think my gut would probably lean towards a Josh Jacobs, a Jair Alexander. There's other guys on that defense I know I'm missing too. Like maybe
my pick would be Kenny Clark.
Kenny Clark, he's and he was the other name I was looking at as well.
Yeah, just a game wrecker in the trenches there. He doesn't put up a ton of stats, although last year he had a career high 7.5 sacks. Just a really, really good defensive player. I would absolutely have Kenny Clark there over Jordan Love. So not a strong disagree, but we're getting there. It's pretty close for me to say that this should be Kenny Clark. The Houston Texans, CJ Stroud already making his mark here. I agree with this one, honestly.
Agreed.
I mean, we've got a great defensive player in Anderson there on the other side who had a phenomenal rookie season. in his own right, but CJ Stroud was the dude.
Yeah.
Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs are going to be two others, and then Tank Dell as well. Three receivers that might be in contention for this spot. But CJ Stroud is what makes this operation roll, and he deserves that nod.
Yeah, if this was Diggs as of like 2 years ago, Diggs, I think I would have, even after the rookie year CJ Stroud had, would have put Diggs there. But this is an older Stephon Diggs post prime, and so I'm going to stick with CJ Stroud. I will say though, you made a good point there. On my show on Saturday, what I did was I took a look at what I thought who teams had the top 10 weapons, like their weapons total. So looking at tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, like their weapons grouping. The Texans are absolutely a top 10 weapons group in the NFL. Joe Mixon, Diggs, Collins, Dell, and then Dalton Schultz. That is a really, really good slate of weapons.
In 1 year. They did this all in 1 year.
Yeah. And when the fact that you could add in Diggs and Mixon after the year they had together with Tank Dell and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz, it's a huge improvement. I will say there are, to me, 10, 11, 12 teams that have really, really incredible weapons when you start to rank them all and you look at it. And I think the Texans are absolutely one of those 12.
It also goes to show, just a slight tangent here, how consistently the NFL proves to live up to its, pseudonym moniker, not for long. Because Dameon Pierce a couple years ago, we were like, wow, they hit gold on this running back. I think he was, like a 5th or 6th round draft pick. And you're like, wow, he's incredible. And then a year and a half later, and he's buried on the depth chart and before you know it, out of the league. And then it made me think of David Johnson, who had that, 3.5 year amazing run with the Cardinals, where he's like, my goodness, this guy's like the best running back in the NFL. And now he's retired and out of the league too. It's crazy how some guys could be a flash in the pan momentarily. James Robinson had that incredible undrafted rookie year for the Jaguars. A couple years later, he's out of the league. Like it is crazy how quickly things can turn.
It does happen quick, and I do think it's one of the reasons why I get really frustrated when fan bases are like, well, who would you rather have for the next 5 years? And I laugh. I'm like, dude, look at rosters, look at depth charts from 5 years ago versus now for your team. 90% turnover for most rosters. Like, honestly, 5 years, there is literally no Bears on the Bears from 5 years ago. I'd have to look. I think I can say that confidently. I don't think there's any now Chicago Bears left.
That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild to think of.
From 5 years.
Yeah, remember how great of a year Eddie Jackson had a few, 5 years.
And then he got old.
And you're like,
it's like 4 years in the NFL is like doing 10 years in the NBA. Like it just the wear and tear on the body and the expectation. That's why guys like Brady, who are able to do it at the quarterback position, or Mercedes Lewis at the tight end position, 19 going into year 19, it's a marvel. It's a marvel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's what makes it even more impressive. All right, we get to my biggest, I think, disagreement.
Agreed. It's in my top 3. It's in my top 3.
The Indianapolis Colts. They have Michael Pittman Jr., the wide receiver, who just got a huge payday.
Nice player.
Very good player. Super talented. Gonna be a great target for Anthony Richardson moving forward. There are 2 guys I would confidently say, and maybe even 3 that I would confidently say I would put ahead of Michael Pittman Jr. here.
Let me try to guess your 3, because I have 2 that I would confidently.
Okay.
Number 1 is Quentin Nelson.
Yep.
My number 2 would be Jonathan Taylor, the running back, because I think when Jonathan Taylor's healthy, he is a top 3 running back in the NFL.
Yep, those are the top 2 I had, and then I would say DeForest Buckner.
Good call. Buckner's still a very good player.
Yeah, really talented player. So yeah, no, I'm in agreement though with those first 2, Quentin Nelson and Jonathan Taylor. I would have been fine with either one of those choices because they're both top.
This
was their position.
This was one of the first ones I looked at, and immediately when I looked at this, I was like, nope, like absolutely knew that was a nope, right? And so I'm glad we agree there that it's a jarring when you see it. You're like, no, that's just wrong. That's not
I
right.
was like, did they? I'm not quite sure that they actually, thought this one through at all when they made this selection, because that's a little bizarre, and it's nothing bad about Michael Pittman because he's really good. It's just that there are some elite players on this team that probably should have been in consideration. The Jacksonville Jaguars one was another one that instantly puzzled me. And then I had to think about it more, and then I was like, okay, I can kind of see the rationale here. I mean, what was your thoughts on them choosing Josh Allen here?
So I was with you. I went and I was like, there's got to be someone else. I'm missing someone. And then as I looked through their current depth chart, to me, it actually now makes sense. I think Josh Allen, he just got paid. He's just coming off a career year. He's finally kind of really living up to that top billing. And I'm confident in saying right now, if you had to, kind of gun to my head, best overall talent player on the team, I would side with Josh Allen. They have some really nice offensive linemen, but I think they're kind of past their peak. And then Trevor Lawrence, I just don't yet feel confident saying Lawrence right now I know is a better just overall player than Josh Allen.
Yeah, that was the one that I was struggling with, because I was like, well, Trevor Lawrence is like a super talented player, and maybe it's the being a quarterback that's kind of carrying the extra load of wanting to put him here on this list. But Josh Allen did have a very, very good season and is certainly on the upswing. Still a very young player, edge rusher that you need, a really important position as well. So I didn't have too much, too many gripes here, but I was, Trevor Lawrence was in the conversation for me. Evan Engram was in the conversation for me. It's also funny, like Trayvon Walker was the number one pick.
Yeah.
They took him at Aiden Hutchinson, and I mean, here we are. We're not even really talking about him being in consideration for this, and he was supposed to be. That was the plan.
It's a big year for him because he's going into this. Has got to be do you pick up the 5th-year option or not after this year? So it's a big year for Walker to finally try to pop and make something of it, because again, he's still just a freak. You look at him and you look at the size of the measurables, but it just hasn't turned into production on the field.
Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, the next three in a row, the next three are easy. Yeah, boom, boom, boom for me.
The Vegas Raiders with Max Crosby, and then
no
Justin
brainer.
Herbert for the LA Chargers. So
I don't have any.
I would agree with that too.
I don't have any qualms with any of that. Now, I will say that the Chargers are one of those that they do have dudes that are just really talented. Like I think a Rashawn Slater, when healthy, is a top 5 tackle.
Yeah.
But
Derwin
James still can be very, very good. I think Joe Alt is going to be awesome. I think Mack and Bosa are both top-end talents. But Justin Herbert right now, as far as just the best player, I think that makes sense. Max Crosby is an obvious one. He is the best player on a team that has some talent. Devontae Adams. You look at now, they have, 2 really good tight ends. An okay offensive line with improving offensive line. But yeah, Max Crosby is definitely the guy there. And, in Kansas City's case, the only other name that you can think of would be Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. Yeah. But beyond that, there's not a ton of meat on the bone for beyond that. They have a lot of then B players after that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe L'Jarius Sneed is getting close to that, or Trent McDuffie, one of those guys are getting close.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I would agree. And Pacheco maybe, but it's hard when you're a running back if you're not putting up Christian McCaffrey numbers to really be in the consideration for the best player on your team. And if you are the best player on your team and you're a running back, that's usually a bad sign for the team, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
For the LA Rams, head scratcher here for me, man. They got Puka Nacua. I don't agree.
This was to me one of my top 3. So I had the Colts, the Rams. We'll get to my next one here in a little bit. Matt Stafford to me is the obvious. He's the best player on that team.
Cooper Kupp deserves to be ahead of Puka Nacua, wouldn't he?
I would agree. I still think Cooper Kupp has done more for me to be confident saying he's a better player today. Now, at the end of next season, if Puka Nacua is not a flash in the pan and he has another year like he just did, well, then it's pretty obvious. And maybe he even then becomes the best player on the Rams. But after 1 year, I can't have him past Matt Stafford. I just can't do it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. The Miami Dolphins, they've got Tyreek Hill, and this one I agree with
Agreed.
entirely. He is an absolute superstar.
Tyreek off the cuff, he's still a top 5 wide receiver, right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
I would agree.
Yep.
So one of the things I'm working on for my Saturday show is I'm gonna try to really like get into. We say this a lot, like, oh, they're a top 10 guy. They're a top 10 guy.
Yeah.
Wide receiver, it's hard because I think the difference when you talk about wide receivers, I think you're allowed to say there are more than 10 top 10 wide receivers. So let me run my theory by you here real quick. I think when you talk about a wide receiver, you can't just say, nope, 10 best and that's it, and that guy's not a top 10. Because I do think there's a guy like a Chris Olave maybe coming up later on this list where I can sit here and I honestly could say he's like a top 10 wide receiver. Now, if I actually go and rank them, maybe he lands somewhere closer to like 15, but I still think that's okay in me saying he's like a top 10 wide receiver because I do think in any given year with the wide receivers, if you go back and I've been doing some research the last 3 years of like the wide receiver leaders in yards, wide receivers have half of the top 10 wide receivers this year are going to pull a hamstring, tweak a knee, and they're going to miss half the season. Like a Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, both missed a lot of time last year. Well, those guys are top 5 wide receivers, top 3 wide receivers. So it's that kind of argument of like, it's a fluid top 10. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
I think it more for the purposes of that conversation, I think it's more allegorical than literal.
Yes.
List. What does top 10 talent represent?
Yes.
Does this person have top 10 ability, top 10 talent? Regardless
Agreed.
of whether they would meet the needs of that list, there's probably closer to 20 receivers that have top 10 capabilities.
Totally agree.
And so, yeah.
And it's different because wide receivers have a lot of that, like, well, a guy like Mike Evans is at the end of his career, but he still put up 1,000 yards last year. Well,
yeah,
I trust a lot more than a young guy coming out. You know what I mean? Even though he might be battling injuries, I still think he's a top 10 guy.
And so there's guys that we can consider Robins. Tyreek Hill's counterpart, Jalen Waddle, probably is someone that has top 10.
He's still a top 10 guy.
T. Higgins,
T. Higgins. So it's funny because
Jordan Addison. So yeah,
I think I think you're right. I think there's about 20 to maybe 25 wide receivers you can sit there and say that's a top 10 guy. And what that means is that on any given week, if that was the dude that had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, you'd be like, yeah, he's sick. He's awesome. Like, I get why he had that day. And
which is why I think we're going to be, this is going in my view. I don't know if this is true, and I could very well be wrong. Salary caps are going to go up. In my view, this is going to have to come to a head at some point down the road here where the wide receiver contracts are going to start to get capped and start to, fizzle a little bit because there are so many wide receivers now that continually get placed into the league, and wide receivers have a much longer shelf life than a running back and sometimes even quarterback. So the more wide receivers that get added to this pool of top 10 capabilities, there's not going to be enough money to go around for all those guys, even if they have the same talent level as a Justin Jefferson.
Well, you're running into it with T. Higgins. I mean, look at what T. Higgins is dealing with. Like, he's now probably got to play for the tag, and then he'll be a free agent next year. And then it's like, does someone want to sign T. Higgins to a $100 million deal, or do they just want to go draft a guy?
Right. And the likelihood is they just drafted the guy in the 3rd round that might come out of nowhere and be great.
Exactly.
Those seem to hit a lot more than any late round picks do.
So I agree. I think the conversation with wide receivers is different than the quarterback one in the sense to where I think you can firmly rank quarterbacks 1 through 10 and feel good about that. With wide receivers, I think you can make a top 10, but know that when you're making your top 10, you have to do a lot more of the qualifiers of why that guy over that guy. And I think it's a lot of it's preference. And I think a lot of it then is also, to me, when you look at that maybe list 1 through 20, you say to yourself, if that's my number 1 guy, am I happy? So that's where I think you get to, like, that's what I look at, like, okay, if I'm going to narrow it down to my top 10, if they're my number 1 guy, am I pumped? Like, am I ready to go? Or if they're your number 1 guy and you're like, no, he's good. Like, he's good. He's got a lot of talent. He's good, but kind of wish he was my number 2. Like T. Higgins. Like if he's your number 1, you're like, okay, he's good. He's very good. But if he's your number 2, you're like, no, we have a chance here. We got a chance.
Did you ever see I think it was like 1987 Batman with Michael Keaton? Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Oh, I actually watched that recently. Grace's first time seeing it. And that just reminded me because Jack Nicholson's thing when he's like mocking his boss is, you are my number 1. And so that's all I think of now whenever you say
it's
going to be in my head anytime we discuss like a number 1 on any team.
There you go.
Which underrated Joker performer. She was actually saying that she thinks he and Heath Ledger had comparable performances in terms like they're different character.
Jack was great,
but it was
Jack
great.
Was legendary.
They're both really good Jokers.
All right. We wasted time, but we don't need to spend any time on this. The Vikings with Justin Jefferson. That's an easy one.
Oh yeah, we don't. No time wasted on that front. I agree with you there. The Patriots, Matthew Judon, who to me is one of the more underrated players in the league. I mean, he played for the Ravens and was a really productive player for them. And then he gets traded and has had a really good career so far with the Patriots too. I don't know. This one kind of gave me pause too because
it's hard.
I'm not as familiar with the Patriots roster. I realized. Who is on this team?
I put them in my question, but I don't have a better answer. So the 2 names I dug with were Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then Hunter Henry. Like I still think Hunter Henry is a very, very quality tight end. And Matthew Judon last year had his worst year as a pro. Injuries. I think just a couple sacks. Like I think he only had 4 or 5 sacks. Like really, and it was an injury thing. So maybe you give him the benefit of the doubt. You say if he gets back to form, he's still their best player. But yeah, the Patriots are like the Panthers, where it's a struggle to find one you just feel confident saying.
Yeah, I mean David Andrews is a talented center, but he's older and towards the end of his career. Christian Barmore, a talented defensive tackle there, just kind of. Almost going in blind and looking at the roster, when you do cycle through it, you do realize, okay, yeah, it's probably Matthew Judon. I wouldn't disagree with that, especially the position he plays too. Again, one of those situations of being an edge rusher maybe helps carry some water for that discussion, but no big disagreements from me on that front. We'll see in a year from now if that changes with Drake May. Maybe some of these offensive playmakers get a little bit more in there, but I would agree Ramondre Stevenson's on that short list. Hunter Henry is one of those weird players because he had so much promise with the Chargers, right, years and years ago, and then just had some really bad injuries, and now he's started to stack some consistent seasons together, and is still a pretty talented tight end.
But now it's like who's throwing him the ball?
Yeah, so that's the problem there. Chris Olave comes in for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah.
I don't have any strong disagreement with this, but I definitely I wouldn't choose Chris Olave here, despite the talent, despite how great I think he is. It's just because there's a future Hall of Famer on this team that I think deserves the recognition on here, and that would be Cam Jordan.
Yeah, so Cam Jordan and Alvin Kamara I would have above Chris Olave. So a lot.
I don't know about Kamara. Like he's just
Kamara still with injuries last year had over 1,000 all-purpose yards, and. And again, off of injuries, but up until last year with the injuries, has been extremely healthy and consistent. In my opinion, a top 5 weapon in the NFL. Last year excluded. I'd still think of Alvin Kamara right now as like an extremely valuable weapon to have on your team. So he's got a lot of miles on those tires now, but I think Chris Olave is very good, and I think Chris Olave has certainly proven after 1 year, he can be a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. He's, to me, a guy in that 15 to 25 range for the wide receivers right now. I'd be like, yeah, he's top 10 on any given day. He could be a top 10 guy. I haven't seen enough yet in his career for him to earn a locked in spot in the top 10, but he's a top 10 talent.
Yeah. I'm not super, disappointed in this pick. But yeah, Cam Jordan for me, or Marshawn Lattimore.
Lattimore, that's a good name too. Yeah,
in contention for this spot. But Chris Olave, a very talented, borderline elite player. New York Giants, I disagree with this one too. Dexter Lawrence, really, really good defensive player. But I have another guy, a recent guy that they've added to the team, and that's Brian Burns as the best player on the New York Giants for me.
So good on you for catching that, because I didn't think of Brian Burns. I was really content with Dexter Lawrence.
We haven't seen him in a uniform yet, you know.
And I didn't think of it. So Burns, I would agree, Burns right now is a better player than Dexter Lawrence. So add that one to one I would change, and I didn't even realize it. You got a point there for sure. I missed that one. I totally forgot that Brian Burns.
So without that, was Dexter? Did you?
Yeah, I felt very confident with Dexter. Yeah. Just in I did not click on the Giants roster, and that's shame on me, because I would have found Brian Burns and it probably changed it. But I in my head I was like, oh yeah, Dexter Lawrence, really good player, and the Giants, no Saquon, no one. I couldn't think of anyone else off the top of my head. So good on you for the Brian Burns find.
Yeah, it might be Malik Neighbors before we know it, but we'll see kind of how that plays out. The only reason I remembered Brian Burns, to be honest, was because I was surprised to see that they were doing a Hard Knocks offseason. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh, that's right.
And so I watched the first episode of it, and they were, talking about the acquisition, all that. So Hard Knocks is now going to be off-season, preseason, basically, and then in season. So we're going to have three iterations of Hard Knocks this upcoming year. I didn't even know they were doing a preseason.
Football content everywhere. I will say the next New York team, another one I have a disagreement with. They're on my list. They're on my list of 3.
The New York Jets, they've got Quinnen Williams here.
Great player.
What's that?
He's a great player.
Oh yeah, absolutely fantastic. Let me guess how many players were you kind of?
I had one that was to me the obvious one that it's like, don't overthink it. That person, it was a first-team All-Pro last year at a very valuable position. And right now, Sauce Gardner, yeah. I look at Sauce Gardner as the blue-chip player for the Jets. Now, they have a lot of guys like a Quinn Williams, who's like a B+. But Quinn Williams had 5 sacks last year. And I know he's not necessarily a rush edge, but
and he's getting, double team probably constantly.
He's a very good player, but like Hassan Reddick added to that defense now. That defense is going to be great. But I think Sauce Gardner to me is the guy you look at right now with another 2 years. You want Sauce Gardner on your team for the next 2 years. You don't want him in 4 years, because then you'll have had to pay him and they're going to be expensive. And like most corners do, they deteriorate quickly. But right now he's in that window where it's he's that dude as a corner on defense. And so, to me, that was the easy one.
Yeah. I don't have any contentions with what you said there. Sauce Gardner would probably be top of the list. I think Breece Hall is a talent that could be here, but he's been hurt, so we'll see kind of how that goes. And then Aaron Rodgers, we just don't know what to make of.
No idea
of where he's at in his career at this point. The Philadelphia Eagles, another team rich and rife with talent, has Jalen Hurts here. I think I have disagreements with this one as well. What about you?
Yeah,
is this hard disagree?
They're on my questionable list. Again, when I saw it first, it didn't jar me. You know what I mean? But now that I really looked at it, I'm like, I probably would put Lane Johnson and A.J. Brown ahead of Jalen Hurts. And then again, Jalen Hurts is a top 10 quarterback for me, but I do think that A.J. Brown is a top 5 wide receiver, and Lane Johnson is first ballot Hall of Fame tackle, who's still probably a top 5 tackle in the league.
Yeah. I am curious about the Jordan Davises. Where do they fit into this discussion as well? Because their defensive line is, maybe they're getting overshadowed by their teammates because there are so many good players along that front 7. So that's kind of a tough one to parse out too. But yeah, I think AJ Brown and Lane Johnson are really good picks. Jordan Mailata, is another guy that
Mailata's right up there. My thing would
Kelsey probably, if he was still on the team,
he'd be very much
be on this list. Yeah.
My problem with you mentioned Jordan Davis.
Yeah.
Is I'm excited to see what he does now this year. Now that Fletcher Cox is out, right? Now that the big brother and again an all-time great player is leaving the center of that line, how do you now respond when you are now the guy? So that'll be interesting to see, because if he has a big year, then he absolutely could be onto that level as like the most talented guy on that roster.
Yeah,
I don't think
Jalen Carter. I mean,
Jalen Carter. Yeah,
he's going into year 2. Like, yeah, there's some guys on here that are very young and on the upswing for sure in their careers.
I don't think you have any
All right.
problems with the next one, do you?
No, not at all.
No.
TJ Watt, one of the easier
I mean,
ones.
Russ Wilson, Russ.
Yeah. I mean, look, if like TJ wasn't on here, it'd be Cam Hayward, probably Minka
Probably.
Fitzpatrick. It's all defensive guys at that point that are, in that discussion. But yeah, TJ Watt's the best defensive player on the planet in my view, and so this is an easy one. I have issues with the 49ers pick.
I do
not
too.
huge gripes, but
to
have Trent Williams here, he's a future, first ballot Hall of Famer. Great left tackle, still probably one of the best left tackles in the NFL. Massive body, athletic, in his late 30s, or is he 40 at this point? I don't even know.
No, he's 30 still.
Late 30s. So, I get it, but you just had the offensive player of the year, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
You've got, a Deebo Samuel on your team, and you've got Nick Bosa, who's a defensive player of the year award winner and just an incredible talent on that defensive line.
Yeah.
I probably would have put Bosa on here, to be honest.
So I would have gone McCaffrey, Bosa, Williams third, Deebo, Ayuk kind of splitting fourth. That's another hard thing with Ayuk.
What about Fred
Deebo.
Warner? Fred Warner would be
so Fred Warner,
3 inside linebacker.
Yeah, he's there. I think I put just the impact of the player. Maybe it's just not as high. And I think Fred Warner had a really rough end of the year. Like he did not end the year extremely positively. But I think to me, the obvious one would have been Christian Bosa. Trent is a great name. And Trent, again, first ballot Hall of Famer. But right now, I think even Trent Williams would say he's not the Trent Williams of 4 or 5 years ago, which would be, then it would be disrespectful to have anyone else not named Trent Williams on that spot.
Yeah, I get it. It's a nod to his career probably more than anything else, and he still is a really, really talented player. The Seattle Seahawks have DK Metcalf listed here, and this was one that I had to pause briefly because I was like, wait, is he? Yeah, I mean, I think he is.
I think he is too. But they have, again, Seattle is a team with, if you look at it, quite possibly a top 10 weapons team. DK, Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's a really great trio of wide receivers. That's a great trio of wide receivers. Probably
Walker and Charbonnet are really good.
With Walker and Charbonnet. I can't remember. Noah Fant at the tight end. Like, that is a solid position group. If this Seattle team wins less than 6 games, it'll be really, I think, because of a disaster on the defense with their new head coach or a disaster at the quarterback position where Geno just implodes, because offensive weaponry and line play, they are above average as far as the NFL goes, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. We get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right tackle Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it
too. Yeah, one of the tops in the league at that position, no question. And there's some defensive guys, and then you can include Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Yeah. These are all guys that are kind of, later in their career and just not as dominant. But Mike Evans probably would have been the one that I would say most would rival this spot on the list. But, Tristan Wirfs is
he's in his prime right now. Yeah, he's absolutely in his prime.
I have issues with the Tennessee Titans selection here.
I do too.
DeAndre Hopkins.
I do too, but I ask you, I'm a little unsure of who to pick in front of him. Like Calvin Ridley?
No, I think, to me, it's clear. Jeffrey Simmons. To me,
Jeffrey Simmons. Duh. Yeah, good call. Good call, Jeffrey Simmons.
He's still a game wrecker at the defensive tackle position.
Yeah.
DeAndre, if this was 3 years ago, DeAndre, I would say, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, right now, I think we'd both agree we would take Calvin Ridley on your team over Hopkins, right?
That does give me pause, though. I don't know. I mean, I probably would. Hopkins is just starting to slow down, and he was never like a speed demon to begin with, right? He was very much a route runner, hands guy, but now he's like slowing down so much that it is hard. He's not going to have game-breaking plays as often anymore. So I probably Calvin Ridley still has that potential, but Ridley's turning 29, I think, this year too. So
I think he just turned 30. He's like an old. Yeah.
There you
He's like
go.
a surprisingly old player.
Well, yeah, he got injured and then missed a year, for the gambling. So that quickly spiraled, and all of a sudden, you lose a couple years of age right there.
Yeah. The Titans are
But
another one of
yeah,
those though
maybe.
where it's a struggle. Like you look at and you're like, you're right. Simmons is you're right. That's the name that should be on there. But beyond that, and it gets into a very like, I don't really know. I like Pete Skoronski, the young offensive lineman out of Northwestern. He had a nice rookie campaign. They add to that offensive line this year. So maybe one of those guys will step up for this team, become like an all-pro guy. And
Levis.
and become a kind of a stalwart. But right now it's a little bit of a, I don't really know what to do with this position.
All right, we end up the list with the Washington Commanders. Terry McLaurin listed on here.
Yeah. Obvious choice for me.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything else. It's funny. They were a team, though, that I clicked on their roster, and I thought, all right, well, let me make sure. Because remember, they traded off guys at the trade deadline. Chase Young.
Right, yeah. They had some
Montez Sweat. So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Who is listed right now as the starting RB1 for the Washington Commanders?
Well, Brian Robinson Jr., I'm imagining.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
The person was signed this offseason to a free agent deal.
Oh, you know what? Was this Zach Moss? Did Zach Moss get signed? No, where did
He's
Zach
in
Moss
Cincinnati, Zach Moss.
Okay. Zach Moss is in Cincinnati. That's right. Who did Washington sign? Because they still have Antonio Gibson on the roster, right?
I think so.
Okay, so
but I was
it would
looking
be
at the
Brian
depth
Robinson
chart,
Jr. and Gibson as the
and it shocked me. It shocked me, and I was like,
Austin
Eckler. Austin Eckler.
That's right.
Austin Eckler, and that's one of those where that's a good reminder for people. Like week one, you're going to be like, "What the hell?" Or like when you're going through your fantasy football draft, and you're like, "Austin Eckler is on the Commanders." Like that's going to get a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. Another guy that had like a flash of the pan, like 2-3 year run where it's like, wow, he's like one of the best backs in the league, but aging quickly, and opportunity to be the RB1 on the team. A great opportunity for him. Like, hey, go take it. No,
definitely. Question. I would say one of the things I found really interesting about this list is I agree with you. The teams that it felt like it was a no-brainer who was number one, and then the teams that it felt like the only reason there's a question is because they have multiple A-level guys are the teams right now that we talk about that absolutely are capable of winning their division and winning multiple playoff games.
Yeah.
Look at the teams we went through that were like no-brainer, or it was like a question because of the talent. Baltimore, Buffalo, Cincy, Kansas City, the Texans. We talked about Green Bay and Detroit. No, like kind of like there's just so much talent. I think it becomes pretty obvious the depth of talent that you have on your roster and high level A players makes it really easy to project you as a team that could win your division and win multiple playoff games.
Roster construction and fit is a thing to take into equation, no doubt. The New England Patriots were, have been, the best example of that, but it's few and far between. Like at the end of the day, you need top talent. You need guys who are just at the among the best at their position in the league to be able to make an impact. And the more of those you can stockpile, the better your team. Which is why guys like yourselves have gripes with the Bears getting rid of Roquan Smith, and getting rid of players that are among the best at their position.
I remember us talking about this our first year of the show when the Jags traded Jalen Ramsey. That was one of those things that drive me crazy. It's like you draft a high-end talent. He becomes a high-end talent. Like he lives up to his promise, and then there's one moment of unhappy, and you trade him. And I know that they got a lot for him, but like I felt the same way with Chicago. Like if you are a bad franchise, the last thing you should ever do is trade talent that you draft. If you believe in them and they're talented, you make it work. Find a way to make it work and to keep guys happy, because the best way to build a Super Bowl roster is through the draft, finding a talent. Look at what the Detroit Lions did. Through the draft, Penei Sewell, Hutchison, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, and then you add a quarterback, you add a really nice running back in David Montgomery, you draft a running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, and all of a sudden, within 2 years, and with the right coach, you're a play away from a Super Bowl run. So, like, that is extraordinarily important. And multiple A-level talent guys and having multiple A-level talent guys will always give your team a real chance. And guys who's, I also think you're right when roster construction, whose clocks are on slightly, you don't want guys to be way off on their clocks, like of where their peaks are at, but a little bit of diversity. Like you look at that Lions offensive line, young Penei Sewell, older Frank Ragnow. You get that veteran who's got that 2 or 3 years left in him, right? And then you get the young guy who can learn from him, but also can live up his talents good enough right now to help you win right now. You need that mix. The Niners are a great example of a mix of like a ton of youth talent and a ton of veteran talent. Brock Purdy, a young guy. Ayuk, still a young guy, not having a second contract yet. And then you mix in the veterans of the Trent Williams and the Fred Warners of the world. George Kittle. And so it's a really, really unique time. Also, I think this list shows us, look how many wide receivers are on this list. Yeah. A wide receiver right now and tight ends, pass catchers, tight ends and wide receivers. If you don't have a bona fide number one wide receiver and a bona fide number one tight end, you're in real trouble. Like you're in real
you have to have
trouble.
A playmaker there.
Like the Chiefs can get away with it because they have a bona fide, maybe the greatest tight end of all time in Travis Kelce, and you have Patrick Mahomes. But it's going to be really interesting for the Bills this year. Like Dalton Kincaid has got to step up to become a bona fide top 10 or better elite tight end because you lost a top bona fide wide receiver. You need at least one bona fide go-to pass-catching weapon. And if you're lucky, you have multiple.
Yep. And that's what the Broncos are struggling with here right now.
Oh man, the Broncos, the
Courtland Sutton maybe is that guy, but he's very borderline,
look at the other teams. I mean, like the Cardinals have Marvin Harrison Jr. and what else? And we don't know that Marvin Harrison Jr. will be
McBride. McBride is probably
fine.
A true number one tight end.
Yeah, he's a fair to maybe just above average. But yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of teams, Carolina. You look at the depth of wide receiver in places and tight end in New York. I mean, Malik Neighbors and what else? Washington, Terry McLaurin, and what else? There's nothing else that gives you any sort of threat. At least you got one guy, but it can be dire out there, especially when you look at the embarrassment of riches. You talk about the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Odell Beckham Jr., and then you have Mostert and Achane, the Eagles, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and now Saquon Barkley. And then who do they have?
Dallas Goedert.
Dallas Goedert. You look at the Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a very good number 2 in Jamison Williams, and then Sam Laporta. Obviously, we know with the Niners, the Bears. Kudos to the Bears. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and then you add a Rome Odunze, who's not at the club throwing stacks of bills at strippers like Malik Neighbors was just caught on TMZ doing. And so it's really like we said, it's the thing that's going to keep Seattle afloat this year is their weapons. Like that's what should keep Seattle as an interesting team if they don't implode with their rookie head coach, because they have a bunch of weapons. And if you are Seattle and you get off to a slow start, oh my gosh, you should get an embarrassment of riches back to trade off DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett to contenders. You could get first, second round picks for those guys.
No doubt.
If you or young players and picks, to give those to teams that could use that next weapon come the trade deadline.
Absolutely. Yep. Couldn't agree more. Oh, that was a fun one. A nice little exercise before we get into the nitty gritty of training camp and all of that. We are taking next week off, so we'll
We're
be
off
back
next week.
after that. And before we know it, then it'll be training camp underway and all of that
Yeah.
craziness. So, yeah, lots to look forward to on the horizon here. But
We
yep,
should
no,
maybe do.
no
We've
show
talked a
next
lot
week.
of offense. Maybe, just maybe, thinking about it, that July 22nd show. Maybe we should try to talk about top 10 defensive units in our opinion in the NFL.
Yeah, we could definitely go over that, which kind of almost projecting into 2024.
Yeah,
Who do we have as our top 10
a
defensive
unit
units going
that you
into
say
that?
to yourself, that's a problem. They should be able to carry their team to a win or two or three wins just based on their defense alone.
Yeah, works for me. All right, well, plan for that. Book it, everybody. We'll be talking about our top 10 defensive units in no time, couple weeks. But yeah, as always, you can hit us up on social media at FB Lounge Pod, wherever you go to your social media networks. And check us out at forfantasysakeqc.com. We're getting ready for our Toys for Tots Fantasy Football League, so you can sign up, find all the information over there. We are a part of the For Frequency's Sake podcast network. This has been the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan. We'll talk to you soon.